Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Today, you've got me again, and of course, my guest. Abigail is still just going through a lot in her life, and sometimes she can make the pod, sometimes she can't. Today's guest is a man called Rik Leaf. Very interesting man, has managed to chisel out a career for himself doing what he loves to do, which I always have huge respect for anyone who can pull that off. He's an artist of many different skills. He's had a very colorful life, an interesting life, has very interesting perspectives, also comes from a colorful religious past, and we talk a lot about decoupling from that. As you know, I've also got that in my past. So yeah, it's a good conversation. It goes on for a couple of hours. I really hope you enjoy it. We have a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and yeah, so without further ado, let's dive on in. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rik Leaf. Mr. Rik Leaf.
I usually like to put down doctor, just cuz.
Dr. Rik Leaf?
Yeah, well, I just put Dr. Leaf, and everybody's like, "Wow, man, we got like a doctor in our like chat. That's super cool." You know,
so if you're a doctor, what can I be?
We'll figure that out.
How about Professor Joby Mallet?
Nice.
Nah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so Rik, no worries, man. So Rik, you're in Victoria.
That is correct.
So we're on the same
territory.
Yeah, so we're in the same time zone, which is cool because I usually talk to my sister Abigail, who might drop in, but she's going through a lot in her life right now.
Okay, see, I didn't know who that was.
Yeah, so that's my sister. I got 3 sisters, and Abigail and I are both in Canada. The rest of my sisters are one in England, one in Holland.
Okay.
And we're just really close. And so it was my idea. I kept pushing her. I was like, we have these really cool conversations. We should record them. And she's like, nah. The imposter syndrome. Like, who do you think you are? Who's going to listen to you guys? And then one day I just downloaded this Riverside app and I said, we're doing it. I'll see you tomorrow. And it proved to be just a lot of fun. And here we are in episode 21.
You know, it makes me think somebody said, I don't know who it was many years ago, said, what you think is normal, somebody else will find amazing. And I think that kind of principle, what you're saying, you're just like, man, our conversations are cool. We should like share our conversations. And somebody's like, wow, they're just us talking.
Yeah.
But somebody else will find those conversations absolutely fascinating, amazing. And so I do. I like that, just kind of putting yourself sometimes in a situation where you realize or recognize, wow, what I just take for granted. Like somebody said to me once, what the heck did I do? I came up with some idea to solve this problem. Oh my God, it was a TV show that I did back in Winnipeg. And I remember saying something, I had this idea and whatever, and anybody could have come up with that idea. And this person said, no. Anybody couldn't have come up with that idea. Your experience, your talents and gifts and abilities and education and everything else that led you to this moment is why you came up with that.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, it's kind of funny you say that because we were my family and we live right close to the ocean, and it's really good fishing. So we fill our freezer every year with salmon. And we were all out fishing yesterday, and I don't know if you know what a downrigger is. Yeah. So the downriggers, for those of you who don't know, basically most of the big salmon are at the bottom of the ocean, so sometimes can be 200 or 300 feet. Now, no weight on your rod is going to take your lure down 200 feet, so you have to use these huge lead balls, and a downrigger will send it down, and then and then you click a lever, and it'll pull it back up. You don't have to hand crank it. You still got to crank the fish up by hand. And Tara, my wife, she doesn't often come. It's just usually me and my youngest son. And Tara's like, man, isn't it crazy who thought of this? Like, who thought of this machinery to be able to grab a fish from the bottom of the ocean? And I was like, yeah, like, because my kids were there. My youngest son has this incredibly inventive mind. Like, he's always thinking, like, I should have a T-shirt that he wears. He says probably 10 times a day, you know what we should do, Dad? We should pull a piece of rope up here, put a pulley up here, and then and some of his ideas are like, yeah, that's not going to work, but some of them are actually quite clever. And I was saying to him, you know what separates, there's people that talk about an idea and just let it die, and then there's people that talk about it and do it, and that's how we have all of these gadgets. doers. Um,
And I think doers don't really worry about when a mistake or failure is just an opportunity to learn.
yeah.
So if you try something and it doesn't work out, it's like, well, you figure out how to do it next time, or you figure out how to do it differently. But I think you and I have probably met a bunch of people in their life that's like, I got this great idea and I'd like to try it, but what if it doesn't work out? And so they'll just talk about it instead of trying it.
I mean, I think you and I both chose one of the most difficult things to do on the planet, which is trying to make it in music, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to actually fully send that and go for it. Man, that is a mountain to climb. And yeah,
I agree. We were talking two things. My dad on his deathbed, I went to see him. It's probably the last time I saw him. And he said, Rik, I think the life you chose was like the hardest path you could have chosen for yourself. Anything else you would have done, I think would have been easier. And he's like, but I really respect the man you become. I love your relationship with your partner. I think you got great kids, and I think you should just keep doing what you're doing. And I don't think if he had not been on his deathbed, I don't think he would have maybe said that quite that way indirectly. And that was certainly something great to hear. And I agree with him. And I agree with you. It is like one of the hardest things. And then yesterday we were just talking to somebody about, the predictions right now for how AI is going to like keep destabilizing so many different industries and take so many different jobs. And we were kind of joking, like, yeah, as a musician, we're like 20 years ahead of the experience of technology taking away your career and your industry. It's just like, I feel like I've been trying to make a living, or I have been making a living in an industry that's been imploding for 20 years.
yeah,
100%.
yeah. Like I have like hats off to you for still. Music is what brings up your bread and butter, right? Like music and creativity. There's a few people in my life. One of them's my producer who lives down in Texas right now and still managed to chisel out a living for himself. I threw the towel in when I realized I had big ambitions. And when I realized it wasn't going to fulfill those, I was like, I don't want to be a bitter musician. And for me, that's just the way I am. Like, I don't dabble very well. I'm not like, hey, bring your guitar and we're going to have a little fire pit and do a sing along. I'm like, unless there's like, and actually I had to learn because I've got a big workshop in Vancouver and I had 500 square feet left over. And because a renter, I sublet it. And then I talked to all of my musician friends from back in the day. And I said, hey, we got this big space. And it was right during COVID, actually. And we said, why don't we just all pitch in and make the jam space that we always wanted? So it's like in-ear mics, all of our gear set up, 2 drum kits, because there's 2 drummers. And I really had to learn how to jam because for me, unless there was a mission, like we are writing a song, I had a really hard time just playing music for the sheer enjoyment of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, like it always had to be a task. And I've had to learn, and I'm still learning how to back off a bit and just do things just for the pleasure of it. Like,
is that true in other areas of your life too, or just music?
It's true in other areas. Like it's one of my biggest challenges. And I'm learning the older I get to embrace who I am and not criticize who I am. That's part of it too, because I'm not you and you're not me. And I think the comparison thing is like, I should be more like him who just seems to wander in the forest and stare at the trees and hours go by. And I get shit done, right? Like I'm a point A to point B person, but extremely creative. So I'm on a farm right now. I'm always creating with my hands. Nice. So I just moved that creativity. So I went from a band. As soon as I realized it wasn't going to make a career out of it for me, I completely shifted and started putting all that creativity into building a business. And that totally fed my creative wand. Nice. But yeah, so anyway, I don't know what started all that, but yeah, I mean, I admire you for, it's funny when you do a podcast, you can end up talking about yourself a lot, right? And I'm like, hang on a minute, we're talking to Rik here.
No way. Well, do you know what? I think 2 things happened to me in particular. One, it was probably about 20 years ago, almost 19, 20 years ago. I was living in Winnipeg, and I got hired by a band called the Wyrd Sisters. And they're like, I'm sure they're Canada's most successful and famous lesbian folk group. They wrote so many amazing songs and albums, and they had a summer tour, festival tour, and they needed a guitar player, and I didn't have any gigs, and I was not the guitar player that they really needed or even wanted, but it was I was all that they could find. And it was a really difficult tour. Just I'd never been that kind of a player. Their songs were really complicated, and at that time, I was less than half of the guitar player I am now, so I couldn't play some of it. And anyways, we're driving down the road in the motorhome between one festival and another, and at that time, I would be what they would call a singer-songwriter, writing my own songs that I had written and touring kind of as a solo. I wasn't doing the band stuff so much. And one of the sisters looked over at me and she said, you know what I hate about you singer-songwriters? It's all me, 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 me. Can't you get over yourself long enough to write about someone or something else? And everybody
Really?
laughed. Yeah, everybody laughed. And I did too. It was like there was too much truth in it. For me to not think about that when I went away. And so I got home and I was like, as soon as I got back to Winnipeg, I was the headliner for a night of singer-songwriters in Winnipeg, which meant I had to sit in the theater and listen to everybody else.
Okay.
And I was like, holy shit, she was right. This is just me, 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 me. And so that inspired me to the Tribe of One album that I released probably about 20 years ago now. It was about Canada, really. And it was my first time of really kind of looking outwardly.
Yeah.
What can I write about? And so that was a really fun experience. And challenged kind of the way I looked at my art and my music in terms of what I could do. And then I think I mentioned you when we connected, whatever, a few days ago for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah.
We'd sold our house and we'd spent a year traveling around the world with our kids. And part of that was my dad died suddenly. He'd never been sick a day in his life, gets one of these awful cancers. Just within few months, he just goes, yeah, he's just gone.
Wow.
And I think all of us have these things where we're like, someday I'm going to do whatever. And I think so we would have been, someday we should travel with our kids, or someday. And it's like, I think I've been sick a lot. I've almost died a few times in my life. So I'm like, what if I wait too long? What if I say, someday I should travel with my kids, and that day never comes? And all of a sudden I'm my dad, and just in a few months I'm gone. So we sold our house and we did spend a year traveling. And that was probably, I think we got back in 2010. And Joby, I don't know, man, that year when I left, I had been touring as a musician, making my living and supporting my family doing that. And I came back in this 1 year thinking I'd just pick up and keep going. And I don't know what the crap happened, but it was just different. I would say 80% of the venues that were booking live original music stopped doing that, which meant 80% of the booking agents that I worked with were out of business. And I was seriously like, what the hell am I going to do? Like, I don't know what else to do. And so that Wyrd sister thing going, why don't you think about someone else, and can't you use that? I started looking at schools and I was like, what can I do? I also saw this little meme that said, be who you needed when you were younger. And I thought, as I was growing up in a really super religious kind of cultic small town experience, I didn't really have anybody saying, hey, you're an artist. Hey, you're a musician, you're creative. Maybe, you're not supposed to be like a redneck kind of hockey player, swilling beer, and maybe there's something else for you. And so I started going into schools, and then I realized, what do I love? And I'm sure you do too. I love songwriting. I love that creative process. And I thought, man, could I let people who aren't musicians into that experience of creating something together? And I remember phoning this one principal, and I was doing slam poetry at the time and teaching slam poetry in some schools, including hers, 2 years. And so I'm scheduled to be up in northern BC. on Monday. So this is maybe Thursday. I phone her. I'm just like, hey, it's Rik. I'm flying up on the weekend. I'll see you Monday. Just wanted to let you know everything is great. And she's like, I'm like, you still want to do slam poetry? And she's like, I don't know. What else do you do? Oh, I do songwriting, I do video production, whatever. And she's like, Rik, could you write a school anthem involving all 340 kids and make a video about that in the week? And I just need to make
No big deal.
rent. Basically, I just need to make, so I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. So I pack some cameras and I get my guitar and I get on the plane. Joby, I'm not kidding. It's not until 8:45 Monday morning walking up to that school that I was like, whoa, wait, what?
All am I doing?
What did I say I was gonna do? Like writing, I don't think I'd ever really co-written songs with another songwriter.
Yeah.
So I walked in, and at that point, it's too late. So I walk in, she's like, we got, 2 classes doubled up for every block, and they're just going to keep coming to you for 30-minute segments all day long. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And we started brainstorming lyrics, and man, I ended up writing a banger song. It was deafening. It was amazing. And that program there's been 80,000 kids that have gone through the program since that point to today. And we've written I've written hundreds of songs by this point, involving tens of thousands of students. So yeah, I love if somebody hadn't said, could you not think about someone else or something else with your gifts and your talents and abilities and not just me, I don't know exactly where I would be right now.
So thank you, Weird Sisters.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. You remind, like hearing you talk like that is like the way you just jumped. And like, I realized, like, when you live with, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, when you live with yourself, your stories are, you've lived with those stories. And sometimes I'll be like in the hot tub or be around and maybe smoke a bit of weed and it loosens me up a bit. And I'll tell stories. And I think my kids who've been with me their whole life know these stories. And like, you did that, Dad? And you quickly realize that you've lived an extraordinary life, but because you've lived it, it doesn't, you feel like all these stories, no one wants to hear these stories. Like we started this podcast talking about when I was 16, Abigail started interviewing me and I was like, who wants to hear about that? And when I was 16, I went into the middle of the Venezuelan rainforest and lived for 2 months with the Yanomami Indians. No option to connect with the outside world, like had to hunt for our food. These people had never seen anything that Western civilization has. Like they lived in the middle of the jungle, naked, shooting with bows and arrows. And I lived my whole life thinking that was not that abnormal. But now looking back, I'm like, like when I look at my 16-year-old and like, can I imagine sending you off? Like, bye now. I mean, we were 7 hours by plane from the nearest civilization. Again, the middle of nowhere. And I won't bore you with the story, but it's not that boring. But, it's interesting how you kind of can live your whole life. I've got this, my father's father, Boisel, who as a kid I was warm to him more than any of my other relations because he was a renegade. And I didn't know why I was drawn to him. He chain smoked. He watched Westerns on his couch all day long. Like and my parents, because they were very religious, always tried to keep me away from him because I think they thought he was a bad influence. As a child, I didn't know. I just loved this guy because he had adventure in his eyes, right?
Right.
And so I remember he used to watch black and white John Wayne movies, and I think he was too sick to leave his couch, so he was always on his couch. I remember opening the door of the kitchen into the living room, and there would be like a smoke machine in a show, the whole room was filled with smoke because the sun was shining in, and he had this little roll-up machine, and he would make his own rollies. And I would sit down on this chair, my feet couldn't even touch the ground, and he was like, look under the couch. No, he goes, shut the door, mate. So, because he's Cockney, live in London. So I go back, shut the door so my parents couldn't hear. And it was just me and him. He's like, look under the seat. I'm like, oh, look under there. And there was these 2 cast metal revolvers with holsters. And he's like, put those on. And he's like, now draw. And I felt like to me, that was like, suddenly I've been let loose in a candy shop.
Right.
With this, just go for it. And anyway, so my dad's brother had the foresight before he died to give him a little tape deck with the, play and record,
Mm.
and a microphone, and said, just record your stories. And I have them all on Dropbox, and his stories are extraordinary and like really, really crazy. And he would have died with those stories had his brother not said, hey, hit record. And I listened to them and tears, my family can't understand him because he's so cockney. But really extraordinary stories. And I'm so grateful that because to me, I was raised learning that he was a bad man. He was a crook.
Right.
He was a crook. He'd made a living in shady ways. And that's how he would have, in my memory, would have died. And so I think it's so important to tell stories. But I also felt when you were talking about this fact that you walked into the school and how rare that is. Like
Yes.
my life is a series of saying yes to things I have no idea what I just said yes to. 100%. Like, oh, I can do that. Holy shit.
Yeah.
How do I figure this out? Now I look at it, I think that's a good trick. But there's lots of times you think, what the hell did I just say yes to?
100%.
Like getting married. What did I just do?
True story.
Yeah.
The power of stories. Many years ago, so when I was living in Winnipeg, that's Treaty 1, and I had this idea to use, I drafted this entire proposal, and I gave it to the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg North to use culture to engage the emerging electorate. And I managed to see her walking down the street. I was on my way to her constituency office to give her this big proposal, and I see her walking down the street. Didn't even know we were neighbors. So I parked my touring van a block up so it's not just some random dude showing up in like
shady
the
van.
sketchy van and jumping out and accosting her. And I walked up to her in this, as she's coming down the street walking her dog. And I said, hi, Judy, my name is Rick. Do you believe in serendipity? And she's like, yes, I do. And I hold up this manila envelope with her name on it. And I said, I was on my way to your constituency office to give you this cultural initiative proposal. And she's like, I'm on my way to the airport in 15 minutes. Come into my backyard. I'll give you 5 minutes to tell me about it. So she opens it up. We sit there and talk. A few days later, she sends me an email. She's like, wow, I read this. It's great. Can I share it with the rest of the caucus? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So she comes back to Winnipeg. She says, look, I got this idea. Why don't she said, I'll host a house concert. You play at it. And let's use it as our first opportunity to see if we can engage the neighborhood through this idea of culture. So we do. I go to her house, I set up my stuff, it's cool, there's lots of, great snacks and wine and everything's going, and then the first people start to arrive. And Joby, like the first half dozen people that came in were like senior citizens, like senior citizens, oxygen tanks and wheelchairs.
75, 80.
And I'm like, shit, I don't do the kind of music that these people are going to like. They're going to hate this.
They want you to play Neil Diamond covers.
Right. And my brain just spirals and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to hate it. And they're going to leave. And Judy's going to see her constituency leaving and she's going to hate that she ever entertained working with me. And so I think to myself, what I should do, I'll explain why I wrote, what inspired me to write every single song, or maybe I'll explain it. And if I explain it, even if they don't like the genre of the music, maybe they'll appreciate the inspiration or the lyrics a bit more. And so basically I did that all night long. I introed every single song by telling the story behind it. And generally speaking, I'm sure by the time the house filled and it was packed, I'm sure it was right from like 20-year-olds to 80-year-olds or, or whatever. It was a mixed bag, but I'd already gone to this place.
This dark place.
Yeah. So it seemed like everybody had a good night. We all went home. It was great. And then this guy, he phones me the next day. Never met him. He's like, Rick, my name's Bob. I am living at the end of your street. I want you to come down to my house at 2:00. I want to talk to you about something. I don't know who Bob is. So I walk down to this guy's house, come in, he pours a glass of wine. We go sit by the fire and I find out he's a painter. He's a political cartoonist, published author, and a retired United Church minister. And he says, Rick, as I was walking home from the concert last night, I said to my partner, that kid is a preacher. And Joby, I've been called a lot of things in my life. That was one of the weirdest things I've ever been called. Now, I really wasn't sure how to take it.
Especially after our background. It's like,
right.
And
because I thought, is he saying he sees himself in me as a younger version or what the crap is he saying? And he continues, Rick, A storyteller trusts his audience. A preacher doesn't trust his audience to make the necessary connections. And he was like, be a storyteller. And he gave me these great examples of how I didn't trust the audience the night before when I explained blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you don't need to say all of that. Trust that your audience can make that connection between what's going on in their city and whatever. Don't be a preacher. And I found that was also one of those things that filed away in my brain that said, as you allude to, we have this history of that, which I never wanted to be. And I think, I met my business partner on that Wyrd Sisters tour, and we've been business partners for now. This is our 20th year. Toured together, made albums together. And when she started working with me, she was just kind of like, what is what's all this me stuff? And what is all this really kind of clunky lyrics about like spelling everything out was her take. She didn't work on that kind of music. And so her kind of pushing me to write better songs and better lyrics and just all of these things, the power of story, just believing that your power. And that's when I go into schools right now. I also do a lot of slam poetry workshops. And I'll tell those kids right off the bat, I'm not here to teach you about similes and metaphors and punctuation. I barely even know that shit. And I've always struggled with spelling. I'm not talking about that either. I'm talking about your story. Whatever chapter you're in right now is important. And lots of times, it's the pain, the loneliness, the frustration, the depression, the discouragement, those chapters that we all share. We somehow you can even have a good family and a good friend network. When is it easy or comfortable or convenient to bring that up? Oh, hey, by the way, I'm super discouraged and I'm really like, it's hard. And so I'm like, something like slam poetry could be this language that would empower a student to be able to talk about their story, their life. And I feel like that's ultimately what I've realized art and music have allowed me to do.
Wow, that's really cool. You said a lot of cool stuff there, like the preaching versus the storytelling. My sister and I have often laughed about Christian worship songs and how they're almost
awful
like
they are.
Well, they're just like kindergarten nursery rhymes,
like
really basic. There's no mysticism. You like you say, you have to spell it out, and I think for fear of people not. I remember singing like at Toronto Airport. I want to talk about your slam poetry, by the way, and stuff like that. But I remember the first time I ever led worship in front of a church was in front of maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people at Toronto Airport Vineyard, because the worship pastor who was supposed to lead worship that night was stuck in traffic. They come into the lunchroom. They're like, who can play guitar and sing? I'm like, I can. Again, like what you did, right? Just stuck my hand out like I should have just sat on my hands. And I go up there and all I know is so Delirious, for those of you who weren't raised Christian, they were probably the most edgy Christian band when I was doing that stuff. Like, they sounded a very Radiohead type of Brit rock. No one had ever heard that at that point. So Cutting Edge had just come out. I think they were called Cutting Edge at that point. So I get up there on stage and I start singing these Delirious songs. I had to write, because remember we had to use overhead projectors?
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone's got to read the song like a retard and be like, I put my hands in the air. Okay, do that now. And then God says, touch my toes. Okay, I do that now. Now I touch my heart. Now I cry. It really is like so remedial. So I started singing these Delirious songs a lot. The lyrics, they didn't click with people. And John Arnott comes up to me, who's the pastor. He's like, you got to sing some songs we all know. And I was like, I don't know any other songs. And there's this like lack of ability to be able to switch off the overhead projector and just there's this one band, I don't know if you've ever heard the band Mute Math.
Yes.
Incredible, right? I don't know if their early stuff was they just used to be a church band, and they played that stuff in church. And
I didn't know that.
I play that for my kids and like, this is amazing. Like the first album, I think on the cover of it, their faces are all light bulbs or something. And it's like nightclub music. And that used to be worship. So that obviously they had they had kind of primed that congregation to kind of get into it. But I would go to that church because they were incredible. One of the best live bands I've ever seen. But yeah, I think saying yes to things, like, you know that Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man? Like, looking back on my life now, I'm so glad. Like the reason that I have you to talk to and all of these other folks to talk to that I'm starting to pull out of the woodwork of my backlog of my life is because I said yes to crazy ass. I mean, I met you in Winnipeg. I saw you for the first time at Toronto Airport Vineyard. And I remember then the murmurs of your band going for a smoke. And I was like, so you are so on the fringes, man. Oh my God, did you hear Rik and his band went for smoking? And they was smoked out behind after leading worship? So you're always a black sheep in my eyes.
I do. I remember having to drive, like, if our hotel was beside a conference, we would have to drive like half an hour across the city to some pub on the other side of town so that we could have a pint and a smoke and nobody could possibly see us. Can I tell you a funny thing, though? Okay, here's my journey after. I mean, I left that world so long ago, I kind of don't remember a whole lot of it, and that's
PTSD
a testimony.
does that.
What's that?
PTSD does that.
Yeah, right? It's really good. No, I kind of, on that Weird Sisters tour, as I kind of alluded to, it was a pretty difficult tour. Just lots of aggression, lots of just interpersonal stuff going on all the time. And we're out here on the West Coast, and we're on our way to Vancouver Island to do, I think, the Comox Festival or something. And that was the one time I could just bugger off. Nobody could possibly need me for anything. And so I walked up. So I should have said the night before, we had the night off, and wherever we were staying, there was an open mic night. And so we went down to this pub, and I decided to get up there. And I don't think the rest of the Weird Sister band had ever seen me do my own stuff. So all they know is that I'm kind of a shitty guitar player playing their stuff. I was kind of shitty. It was like really hard for me. And so at this open mic night, I get up and MJ says, "Hey, do you want me to jump up with you?" That's the bass player. She became my business partner. And we'd been touring at that time. She's like, "Do you want me to grab my bass and jump up with you?" And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So the two of us get up there and we just blow the place away. You're not expecting a professional person to get up at an open mic night in a smaller kind of town. So, it was the expectations too, but we did maybe 5 or 6 songs. That was the first time the lead singer would have ever seen me do my stuff. So the next day we're on the ferry. I get to bugger off. Nobody can find me. I'm sitting up on the front of the ferry, just enjoying the Pacific. And she's walking around looking for her partner, who ironically at that time of her life was a guy. And so she's walking around looking for Darren. He was the driver of the motorhome. And she sees me. And normally, like, we wouldn't have had anything to say to each other on that tour if it wasn't about being on stage and whatever. She comes and sits down beside me. And she's like, "How come you're not super famous?" She's like, "You're this pretty boy. This high falsetto voice makes all the girls wet. How come you're not really successful?" And I said, she just blew past any artifice or whatever. And so I just looked at her and I said, "Well, I came from a religious past and I couldn't do it anymore. So that was where my career was. So I'm basically starting over again."
Yeah.
She understood immediately. Like, I basically said I couldn't do that anymore. I just, the whole thing, I had to leave that culture and everything. So I left my success at that point and I'm just starting over again.
Yeah.
And she says, "I totally get it." She said, "Do you know that Ani DeFranco lost about 70% of her audience when she married her husband?" And she said, I don't know if you know who Ani DeFranco is.
I've heard of her name and I probably know her music.
She was, like, back in the 90s, like, probably the biggest act for that kind of LGBTQ community.
Okay. Yeah.
Super huge. And then she, like, marries a guy.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
And all of a sudden, it's like,
"Fuck you!
Yeah, you broke
Traitor."
the rule. It's like if I went for a smoke after a youth conference, if you fall in love with somebody of this gender, well, those are rules. You can't break those rules. And if you do, you're out. because that's what this is all about. Not about you, not about me, not about the heart, not about our story. It's about the rules. And so Kim looks at me and she's like, I totally understand. You know, she tells me this thing about Ani. And then she said, you know, I'm not even sure. She's talking about the Wyrd sisters. And she's like, I'm not even sure it's in our best interest to be billed as a gay and lesbian act anymore. Because if we contact the artistic director for a festival, they might say, well, we've already booked our gay act. We don't need another one.
Shit.
And then she said, I think we were maybe on our way to Pride, actually, to play in Vancouver. I think that was actually what we were doing. Because she said, having said that, though, she said, when we get to Vancouver, Darren is your boyfriend and not mine. And I totally got it. I was like, man.
Was Darren a musician as well?
No.
Okay.
So what I thought was interesting was like, you know, in many ways, coming from this religious background, and as you allude to, kind of that vineyard world where I would have like started, I would have had my first chapter of my music career and what that was all about.
Yeah.
And there was so many rules about the songs that we would write and how we would write them and how you would perform them and play them and blah, blah, blah. There was and you couldn't smoke and you couldn't drink, or if you did, it all had to be in the closet and you had to like hide. Nobody could know who you really were. And if you had any questions about this or that or other big things, you couldn't share those. You had to project this confidence and whatever. I leave that. My journey as an artist takes me into the LGBTQ community. And for the next however many years, that's my neighbors and my friends and my business partner and bands that I'm touring with. And it's, I would say, looking back on it, that vineyard culture was never mine. It never fit me well. It never served me well. It was never really a good place for me. I met some great people, but you meet great people everywhere. So when I finally said, this is going to kill me, this is toxic for me, I'm out of here, I end up in this other community, which is also not my community, but I'm meeting a great, amazing people. And it was music that was giving me this avenue to be part of this community. And you know what? I would go to those festivals. I would play with the Wyrd sisters. They'd written songs about things like, you know, the Montreal Massacre and all kinds of women's issues. And of course, issues about sexuality and coming out of the closet. I remember the lead singer, one of the first nights I ever played with them, concert, it was at a women's festival. And the bar was packed. There's probably like 500 people in there. And again, Wyrd sisters were huge. A couple decades ago. And so everybody knew them. Everybody knew every one of their songs. And they had this song, Leave a Little Light On. And it was this idea that, you know, no matter where your journey goes, wherever it takes you, that was just their storytelling imagery.
You wrote a song called Leave the Light on Love.
You did?
You did.
Oh, probably.
Leave the light on, love. Leave the light on.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably inspired by them. Well,
okay.
So they write this. So at the end, just like it would have been at a conference, you start jamming quietly over maybe the last 4 chords. And the band or whoever, the people in the crowd, you got this little la 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 la. La la la, just that kind of a repetitive, simple melody, and it kind of brings you together, and it kind of sonically starts to fill this room. And Kim starts speaking into her microphone as the lead singer of this band, and she's just like, you might be out there feeling like nobody knows who you are. You're hiding in the closet. You're nobody understands you, nobody gets you, nobody accepts you. Well, we've left a little light on, and you're now here amongst your mothers and your sisters and your lovers, and we've left the light on for you to come in and be who you are. And I'm like, all the hair is standing up on my arms as I'm in the back playing this guitar. I'm like, holy shit.
Feels like church.
This is like worship. Yeah, this is like church.
Come to the front.
And they are. She's not inviting people to come front. They're coming to the front, and everybody's got their arms around each other, and they're crying. And I'm like, holy shit. Music and what it allows us to do and how it allows us to connect with people is so much bigger than I ever imagined. The Vineyard would have had me believe that some supernatural thing was happening because of the lyrics that we were writing about, because we'd spelled out, like we were talking about being a preacher, that we'd spelled out, oh, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And because we're saying this word, that's why we're having this incredible moment in a room with, 500 people. it's music, it's art, it's the human connection. It's when our voices join together. It's when we touch each other and you put your arms around each other and all of a sudden you break through some kind of sense of isolation and you're there. And it was the most beautiful thing. And that happened every single fucking time I played with them.
Wow.
So it was absolutely revolutionary to me for my path to take me to some place that seemed so unlike, like,
Yeah, that could be
different.
polar opposite. Yeah.
Right. Polar opposite. Perfect way to put it. And yet the music was exactly the same in its power for connection to other human beings. It was beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you see it in, like, my older daughter is really into the rave scene, and my oldest son, yeah, but she travels all over the place, spends all her money. And I really encourage it because I'm just glad that you're rubbing shoulders with human beings and you're not sitting in your basement on social. I mean, they are on social media, but you know, she went to this one in LA or Vegas or something, met some friends, because it's a real community, right? Like they kind of travel in a horde. And she's like, yeah, we went to the show, and the guy I was with, he's just like, I'm just leaving my phone in the car. And she's like, whoa, that's edgy. He's like, yeah, I just want to like be in the moment, because you see the videos of the videos and everyone's got their cell phone up, right? And my daughter, who's 21, 22, I don't know, I lose count. I was just looking at, and she's like, yeah, and oh man, we were just in the moment, and we were just making memories, and just watching the kind of penny drop for her that, you know, there's this like other place you can lock into, which is like this ethereal type of energy that's right now, right here. And when you leave the room, it will be gone. It's like this moment.
Right.
We should connect the dots with church, because it was kind of how we met. And one of the struggles, I remember having this struggle, and it's only like years after you're able to unpack it and actually see it for what it is. But I remember leading worship and always struggling with this. I was in a very controlling cult, I would say, in Kamloops. But before that, other churches and different things. But there was always this dance between leadership thinking that you're in the flesh, right? Do you remember that? Which is like, you're drawing attention to yourself. And people would, some people will come up and say, look, you got to be careful. You're drawing attention to, like when you started to hit the rock and roll vein, which is like, fuck yeah, like this is a riff, and we're like, and you're having fun, God forbid, and you start jumping around a bit and like actually just groove into the groove, not groove into some God spirit or whatever. It's just like, this is a good drum beat, right. or maybe you wear like, I mean, one time I went up because I was coming through this kind of like gothic hairband, I don't know, I was wearing like this furry jacket, and it was just like, I remember Nolan coming up one time, and I had a tube amp, right? Because I was sick of this like solid state, heavy little pod. I wanted like noise, and he came and threw a jacket over it because it was too loud. And I was always like, and now what I realize is, because when I went to play in nightclubs, I would, like, my first album, Well Behaved and Working For You, after I left the church, was all about me coming out of religion. And so there was a lot of things that alluded to God, but you could have easily interpreted it as a man and a woman. And no one came up to me and said, what's that song about? You're not singing about God, are you? It's just like, I could have got up there and stripped down naked and just standing facing the drummer with my back to the whole crowd. And that would have been for an hour, I get to do what I want on that stage. And they could walk out of the club if they wanted, but that's my expression. And I think that performers need, like, if I paint a beautiful painting and no one comes and looks at it, it's only half of the job is done as an artist. Like the other half of the job is to have someone come and look at that and be moved by it, right? And so that's why I'm not very good with just writing a song that just sits in my basement and goes nowhere. Because I now realize that for me, the payoff is when the audience listen to it. Then the song is complete. Then the painting is complete. And in the church, that payoff part was cut off, because when people would start to look at you, they were then forced to look straight up to God. So this song didn't come from you on stage. Like, you wrote that song, Rik Leaf. Man, that's a fucking
Right.
kick-ass chorus.
Right.
Stop that thought. And then it diverts,
Right.
right? And as an artist, I felt such freedom in getting away from all of that confusion because I was confused by it.
Mm.
Um, I remember seeing this band, and he produced both of our records, and he's still a good friend. Naturally, we're going to jump on it. He's called Gabriel Wilson. He's probably the
Okay.
biggest name in Christian production music now. Like he's made an incredible living from it. If you're a big mega church in the States, you're going to go to his place. But he's still like the sounds that he did both of our albums, and I think he's a fantastic producer. And he had this band called the Rock and Roll Worship Circus. You ever heard of them?
Have I heard of that? I don't know. I wouldn't know a single song. I feel like maybe I've heard the name though.
Yeah. So they wrote worship songs that had like a Beatles slash 80s hair band infusion. So they wore full makeup. They looked like Alice Cooper on stage, glittery clothes, nail polish, the whole bit. And they would sing worship song, and so they came. I booked because in Kamloops I had this little venue in the basement. I don't know if you ever saw it as a church that we were at. And so the weeks that we weren't on every day but Sunday, I was free to book that as a venue.
Mm.
So I would have like I was way over my head. Like there was raves that happened there on a Saturday night, drugs everywhere. There was all mirrors along the one wall, like literally condensation pouring down the mirrors because there was like 1,000 people in there. And I'm like, holy shit, it's church tomorrow. What the hell? And I had to like clean the whole place, and it stank like sweat. There was pills. And I had to make that place look like a church the next day. And then I'd get sometimes heavy metal bands that were like like I thought the place was going to get burnt to the ground. Again, way over my head. One of the bands that came through was the Rock and Roll Worship Circus. And
Okay.
they shook my world because they came to the venue and there was 3 people that showed up, and I was one of them.
Wow.
And they played so loud, I think my ears were almost bleeding, but the sound was incredible. Like they bought these huge, they had key bass, instead of like the bass guitar.
Yeah.
So it's like the Doors, like,
Yeah.
so fat. And they had their own sound system, and they played for 3 of us. And it was worship music. And I didn't understand anything they were saying, but I had such an experience there that actually completely shifted me forever. Like it
Nice.
shifted me. I was so inspired by the fact that I was like, oh my God, you can actually do it. You can play rock and roll, and you can express yourself with your fashion. Like all of it changed my life. Like the fact that they express themselves with the fashion, like, and I started like doing it all because I just wanted to get out. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I kind of look back at some of the pictures. I'm a little embarrassed by it, but I was kind of like just trying to get out of this mold. And they gave me the doorway to be able to do it because they were accepted by the church, but they were just like, this is what we're doing. And it was incredible musicianship, like huge guitar solos, like 80s hair band.
Wow.
Like just crazy guitar solos. I mean, they still are. They were an amazing band. But they always stayed in that church vein, which is interesting. Like, but anyway, so I think what I was trying to say was at the beginning of all of that was this. I don't know if you struggle with it, but it was that like I'm a performer, but I'm not supposed to perform. I feel like I'm just supposed to be a slave up here, like an invisible slave. Like that was your whole objective being a worship leader, was to make yourself invisible. It's not me, it's God. I remember this girl coming up. I was working with homeless people, and there was a very attractive girl, and I was single. And she's like, I'm really attracted to you, Joby. And I said, you're not attracted to me. You're attracted to Jesus in me. I'm like, looking back, I'm like, Joby, you could have had such a good time. Oh my God, you deflected such an opportunity.
It's amazing.
Which is why we don't think about our past, because it's bloody embarrassing. So how do you come so far from all things Christianity and church and religion, but how do you square all of that now, looking back? Like you were in a movement in Winnipeg that was drawing people, kind of like the way Kamloops was and Toronto was. Like it was a creative epicenter, right?
But yeah, I mean, it was so funny. I think the way I see it, even when we went to Winnipeg, I think we were well on our way out the door of the whole thing without knowing it, maybe even consciously. But I remember I was on tour once with another guy, and we were in Quebec. And we did this show, and this couple, I think they were the organizers, they said, "Oh, we want to take you guys out to a pub afterwards. We need to talk to you about something." So we go out to this pub, and they're like, we they're like, we've been going to this church for 17 years, but our pastor, he's like spiritually abusive or whatever they call it, and he's like, they're like, we have to leave, and so we think we're going to move to Winnipeg to be part of that vineyard church in Winnipeg. And this guy David was the pastor at the time, and everybody knew him. And what I think is so funny when I look at it, we get up there with music and we play a song. If you're a good musician and you're a good performer, you know how to connect with an audience. I think that's generally, as a lead singer, our focus as lead singers is typically on the audience and making that connection. My band we would come off stage, and if I had connected with the audience in a way that was really meaningful to me, we could have had shit sound, and I would be like, well, it was a great show.
Yeah, yeah.
And my band would be like, that sucked.
Yeah.
It was like my guitar sounded all mid, or like the bass was like muddy or whatever. Vice versa. We could go there. I would have made no connection. I come off, I'd be like, what a shit gig that was. And the guitar player's like, oh man, I had beautiful tone. I had a great. So
just masturbating back there.
Yeah. So I think, these people, they go to a conference with one of these guys like David, and he makes a connection with them, and they think he has made a unique connection with me. I have an incredible, I'm drawn to him, and he probably feels the same. So they're like, we went to this conference where David was playing, and Pierre had this incredible, connection with him. So we think we're going to come to Winnipeg. We're going to move there for this. And you can tell he thinks he's going to come and he's going to become David's bestie and everything. And we're just like, hey, do whatever you want. I'll tell you something. If you come to Winnipeg, you probably won't actually get together with David for a year. You'd be lucky if you saw him outside of a church service like once.
He's a rock star. David Lewis, right?
Yeah, and that's not what they want to hear. Anyways, we kind of left. I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want. Like, move to Winnipeg, do whatever you want. I don't care. But we went to the next place. And after that show, me and this guy started telling that person about the weird conversation we just had the night before with these guys. We just tell that story. And this guy says, oh, I know who you're talking about. And he's like, here's what's going on, you guys. They're like, those guys, they don't want to take responsibility for their life. They want a leader that they can follow. They want a leader to tell them what to wear, what to think, who to vote for, who to be for, who to be against. And so if their pastor has become somebody so toxic in their life, they can't allow him to have that power, they don't want to take it for themselves. They want to, if they have to take it back from him, they want to turn around and give it to someone else. And so if that means they have to pack up and move 2,000 kilometers to Winnipeg so they can give it to this guy, give it to David, well, that's what they would do. And that to me is one of the reasons that, I feel like all I pretty much say about the whole vineyard days is I feel like for myself, it's something that you should grow out of. I look at it in my 20s and I'm like, yeah, I was trying to make sense of a whole bunch of things. I was coming from a super religious kind of cultic background. For me to find a place like the vineyard was like a stepping stone to start thinking for myself. I wasn't abandoning the entire notion and construct of a God or whatever, all of this kind of, you're going to hell if you do this, or you're going to heaven if you do that. I took this stepping stone that took me into the vineyard, but eventually the progression of life and maturity and independence just led me out the back door of that. And I look back on it and I'm like, one of the weirdest things I find is when I meet somebody who I knew 20 years ago or 25, 30 years ago, and they're still doing it.
Yeah. I was talking to Todd Atkinson about a week ago and a couple days ago, and his podcast will be aired soon. And he became a bishop, actually. Went from charismatic, working with Nolan Clark, and became a bishop. It's pretty wild. And now he's excommunicated.
In
Um,
a Catholic church or in what?
well, no, it was like a edgy,
Oh,
like
okay.
that they still believed in the Spirit, and move of the Holy Spirit and whatnot. But he wore dog collar, and they did a lot of the kind of. It really interesting though. Do you know? I asked him about what
Wow.
the dog collar means, and it actually is you're a slave. It's a symbol of slavery.
Hmm.
You're a slave to God.
Interesting.
Highest call.
Gross.
um, but I said this to him. I said, same thing like you. I don't know if you, I said, when I talk to people that are still in it, it's like they're in arrested development.
There you go.
And what you said about being told what to do is so true, because when we went through COVID, probably one of the biggest things in our lifetime, there was these stats that came out, right? Like I think it said like 80 or 90% of people, when push comes to shove, they think they're really edgy and they're really like think for themselves and wild. But when push comes to shove, they want to be told what to do. Because that's why, for me, that we were so surprised about the people that kind of fell into the, I don't know where you stand with all of that, but fell into the trap of just lining up and doing what the media was telling them to do and what the government was telling them to do. Like there was this guy in my life who was a punk rocker, right? Like full, like a real punk, had a band called The Pirates, and really, really was not just a fake punk. He's like a real punk,
Okay.
And he completely fell in line, which just shocked me, because I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
isn't what the whole punk rock scene is stick it to the man? But then this kind of thing happened, and it like pressed on this little nerve, which is below this kind of persona that you've put on, which is punk rock. And in actual fact, you're really scared to, when someone really in authority comes and says your life's on the line unless you do this, it's like,
right.
So it's interesting that I don't think it's just Christians. I think it's something that's in humans in general, that the outliers are folks that think, hang on a minute, I don't know if this is right. What's going on here? I'm just going to take this back door out here. And when you get out the back door, you realize there's only 4 or 5 people out there. Most people get taken up with the masses and do what interesting.
Yeah, 100%.
And so, people get hurt, and then people hit pause on that and then move to another. I think that when I look back on my religious history, there's a lot of pain there, just because there was a lot of abuse. But I think when charismatic pastors start to freak out is when they start to lose their hold on people. Like when people start to question, they start to lose their shit, because that is that's the glue that keeps it all together, is when I say and you do, and you don't question what I say. But as soon as the questions start to fly and people start to think that they have a right to actually speak up against the Lord's anointed, they got to actually either excommunicate you, because you're going to be the rot that causes the whole thing to,
I think it's okay. So I've learned over the years. This is my take, I guess, on all of that. Ideally, I think you fall in line and you just do what you're told. I think that's the point of religion. If you won't do that, they want you to fight them. They want you to disagree and to fight and constantly argue, and because that also shows that they are in this place of power and authority, and that you might disagree with them, but you recognize that they need to be convinced or they need to be appeased, and you're still focused on them. The one thing they cannot handle is being ignored. If you find yourself in that place where you're just like, yeah, I don't need you,
I know.
then that drives them fucking insane. Years ago, again, living in Winnipeg, we hosted a Halloween party, and I'd always wanted to go like hardcore into drag. And I didn't just want to dress up like, half-ass. I really wanted to do it. And this party was my times. I mean, I went and got my chest waxed. I got somebody to help me. I bought my first bra and got my first mini. It's ridiculous how expensive lingerie is for women. I tell you.
You went deep, dude.
100%, man. And then
Did you wear a thong?
Probably.
How do you wear women's underwear without your
Well,
balls
I don't
falling
know.
out?
I don't know. Maybe I just went commando. I really don't remember that part of it.
You'd have to
I
wear granny
remember.
underwear.
What's that?
You'd have to wear granny underwear because your balls just fall
Oh,
out.
there, you're right. You're right. It would have been
I've
something.
tried.
Well, I got somebody to help me do my nails and my eyes and my makeup. It was amazing. And yeah, I'll send you a picture sometime.
Dude, and I might be turned on. Maybe you shouldn't.
I have this incredible party. Everybody comes. We had a DJ in the basement. It was just pumping music. It's in our house. So this is obviously in October. So now
in Winnipeg.
In
Freezing
Winnipeg.
fucking cold.
Summer. Next summer, I'm on a little family tour. I have just enough gigs set up across Western Canada to pay for a holiday. And I wake up in Kamloops. I'd done a show in a backyard there. And the people that we're staying with, they're like, Rick, there's a phone call. This is, I guess, obviously before I had a cell phone. Rick, there's somebody on the phone who's calling for you. And it's the pastor of the church in Kelowna. And he's phoning, and he's like, Rick. And he used to be a pastor at that TACF.
Is this Wes Campbell?
This was Kim Unruh.
Okay. What?
Yeah, did you know that he went to Kelowna?
So he was my youth pastor in Toronto.
Okay, so and
then I know he went to Kelowna, yeah, but he became the pastor there.
Yeah, I think they kicked Wes out, or Wes left, or he got kicked out, I don't know. So then Kim became the head pastor in Kelowna. So it's Kim on the phone, who I would say knows me, whatever. And he's like, hey, Rick, sorry to bug you so early. So anyways, the leadership here in Kelowna heard that there was a party that you had in Winnipeg. So now we're like, think about this, 9 months ago. And they're like, apparently at this party, you were in drag and there was people drinking and smoking. And so, yeah, I'm just calling to see if you want to defend yourself. And I'm like, literally, Joby, I remember laughing and saying, well, not to you. And he's like, yeah, okay, so, you're whatever, they don't want you to come or, whatever. And I'm like...
Oh, so you were booked in to play in Kelowna?
So I think that was the deal. They had like a back room venue and whoever was hosting my concert in Kelowna was using this room. So it was why that person didn't just move the concert from that room to somebody's backyard and just carry on. I don't know. I guess that's how controlling everything was there at the time. But so I said, geez, if they're so bent out of shape, why don't they call the leadership of the Winnipeg Center Vineyard? They were all invited to this fucking party. Why don't you talk to the pastors? They were all invited to this friggin' party. And he says, I did. And I'm like, and? Yeah, they said it was great. They said it was a great party and they were all invited, whatever, but you still can't come. That's when I realized, and I've carried it with me to this day, there's no point in defending yourself, ever. No. It's not about a misunderstanding. It's not about some clarification that you could bring that would explain. It's like about rules and laws and regulations that are meant to govern your behavior. And if you stepped out of line, it doesn't really matter why or how or with who. You broke the rules and you can't come. So I thought that was so brilliant. I was so glad I hadn't wasted a single breath defending myself, because it also was like, I don't need you. I don't need your approval. Maybe I was going to make $500 or $700 or something. Like, I'm getting to this point where I realize no amount of money is worth my dignity and my independence and freedom and love of life. So he says, I also know, Rick, it's not fair to just pull the plug on a concert like the day of. So come by my house when you get to Kelowna and I'll give you a check, because I know this is how you support your family. Okay, you're going to love this, Joby. So I go to his house. And he meets me at the door, all magnanimous. And he's a giant guy, too.
Yeah, I know.
He meets me at the door very magnanimously, hands me this check. Here you go, Rick. And as I'm taking it, I said, hey, Kim, thank you for giving me a story that there have been churches in this world that have paid me not to come and do a concert. And he did not think that was funny. And I laughed. It was such a great moment for me, so liberating. And I took that money. And we drove to Costco and we bought our first DVD player, and The Lord of the Rings had come out. And so I bought this DVD and I was like, every time we would watch DVDs, I would often think, thank you, Kelowna, for paying me not to come and do my concert because I looked so beautiful in drag.
Felt so sexy.
I felt so great. Yeah.
Wow. That's wild, man.
You know what?
Word travels in those small circles. You know, I think you're right. You know, ignoring, because most of the time I think that, you know, Kim, I've been in leadership. I think you have too, maybe. And there's this virtuous place that you think you're at. So you think you're doing the Lord's work. So when he hangs up the phone after rebuking you, he's feeling pretty damn good about himself because he manned up and told, you know. And so that's the embarrassing. I have a lot of embarrassment over some of the stuff I did. Kind of was pushed to do and told to do, but really just getting right involved in people's lives. I mean, I remember for me, my coming out of all of this, I call it coming out because it feels like that, right? Like coming out and saying you're gay or whatever. I mean, when you finally realize that you're moving on from this, it takes a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage for me because it was everything. A lot, you know, doing that means you're going to lose a lot of your friends and you have to redefine your life. And it's the hard part is detangling your relationship with God and religion. And I still don't think I've arrived at that spot. I mean, I still can't really go into a church unless it's a wedding or a funeral without it bringing up a lot of emotion in me. And I remember my dad passed away. So I moved with my then wife back to England for a year to help my mom kind of transition into this new home. And we were in Kamloops then. And I was in leadership. I was running the discipleship school because that's how I met you in person, was bringing kids. We were on our way to reservations to do work. And we stayed at your house for the night before we drove up to Thompson.
I forgot about that.
Do you remember that? Like we had this 1980s van, Ford Econoline, where you could see the floor because it was so rotten on the bottom. Because we were running what we called the Jesus School. So people would come to the school, and then I would lead this mission trip to a really, really rural fly-in reserve. And in the winter, you could drive there over an ice road. And so I bought this old van. We called it the Purple Burden because it was purple. And it was a burden. It kept breaking down. So the transmission went right before our trip. So I found a Mustang transmission. So it's a Ford, should link up. But in a Ford Mustang, the shifter is right back here because you're in like a sports car, right? But in an Econoline van, the shifter's so I had to reach way back here to change gear in this thing. And thank God it was before cell phones, because parents would have called and said, bring our kids back. Like, this is way too dangerous. And I mean, I've got a million stories of the chaos because you're driving from Kamloops to Winnipeg in January in a clapped out old van. And I had as many, probably 12 or 13 students in the van. And I remember, we pulled into your place. And you guys put us up, and we were sleeping all over the basement and everywhere. Right. And then we drove from your place. We had to get up at crack of dawn and drove all the way to Thompson in the middle of winter, like crazy. And then after that, it was like we were coming through with Whitfield with the band.
That's the trip I remember.
Right. And I remember connecting with you because I was really trying to understand all of this, you know, and I think, I really felt connection with helping me. But going back to that story, so I was in England for a year, and then my marriage was on the rocks big time because I was in such a controlling church. Like to me, it was a cult under the umbrella of Christianity. So incredibly controlled and so much. But when I left for England, I was still fully in it. And my wife, Jen, she kept saying, like, Joby, don't you see? This is crazy. You can't question anything. What he says is what the pastor says is like trumps everything else in your life. Like, he's involved in our marriage, in our every movement we make. Can't you see this is wrong? I'm like, no, you can't speak out. And I was defending. And then after about 6 months, and our marriage was really rocky. After about 6 months, I suddenly started to allow myself and I remember the courage it took to allow myself to go and look behind the curtain to touch, to see, you know, to see if there was someone there pulling strings. And once I started doing it, I felt, okay, I didn't get struck by lightning. I'm going to pull that curtain back a bit more.
Right.
And then it was like I saw the Matrix. It's and I could not unsee it because I was like, holy shit. It was like all of a sudden it like came in a flood. I just saw all of it and the hypocrisy, but I wasn't totally out yet. I still was kind of in and out, but I started to relate to my wife again. I was like, I was allowing myself to look at the cracks and not feel like I had to defend the cracks. You know, oh yeah, that is a crack. Yeah,
Right.
you see a crack, I see a crack. Like, whereas before it's like, no. It's like, you know, it's sacrilegious to go there. And then we were flying back, and it was Jesus Fest. Did you ever play at Jesus Fest in the powwow grounds? Yeah. So as we flew into Kamloops, Jen was wearing a mini skirt. And she was like, I'm really nervous about wearing this because Heather Clark is going to be there and she's going to rebuke me. Is rebuke even a word in the Western world? Do people know what that means? It means basically a big finger. I remember sitting on the plane and we had 2 kids and I was like, you wear that. You wear that. I support you fully. Walk into those powwow grounds and wear that mini skirt. She's like, okay. And, you know, Heather was pretty intimidating, right? And can be, and Nolan too. And so we walked into Jesus Fest, and there was a lot of heads turning. And you know, how dare you look sexy? You know, how dare you wear a long dress down to the ground, look modest, and after Jesus Fest, we walked into church on a Sunday, and I stood at the back, and the pastor got up. And he said after worship, and he said, "Hey, I just want to. Here's the announcements. We got house group tomorrow. We got a prayer meeting over here, and we just want to take 5 minutes to pray for our brothers and sisters who are dealing with war-torn something in Africa right now, for I guess. And then and then off to the next thing. And I just." For me, it was like the blinders were completely out, and I just saw that the absolute phoniness of it all. Like, it is so phony. And I looked around, and I'm like, how? It is like seeing the Matrix. I remember looking around, like, no one sees this? And it was like I was at a comedy show. I was like, you don't find the joke funny? Because I can't hold back the laughter, because this is crazy. He doesn't really believe. He's not really. No one's putting their head down and actually thinking about. They're still worried about the fact that Jen wore a miniskirt at Jesus Fest, you know. And we walked out of there, and I never went back. And I took a couple of beers to a house party that someone was having who was in Jesus school and then just carried on living in Kamloops. And because I was in England for a year, that was just normal, right? And I got a phone call the next day. Heard you took a couple beers over to this house party. It's like, yeah, that was great. And the fact that I didn't bow down and apologize, and I actually said to the pastor, I think we know who he is, Mr. Clark. And I said to him, he's like, you're in my inner circle. How dare you do that? I was like, no, I'm not. I've been in England for a year. I'm not in your inner circle. He goes, but don't you want to be back in there? And I said to him exactly, I said, I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care. No. And he wanted to jump down that phone and strangle me. Like, I could just tell he was like, because he's a pretty violent guy when he wants to be. And he's an MMA fighter, and he knocked me out cold before. And I felt so liberated because it actually, for the first time in my life, he had no power over me legitimately, and he didn't know what to do with it. And I think a narcissistic person doesn't know what to do with that. What you mean?
100%.
You're not giving me. You're not. And most of those leaders have major narcissistic tendencies. And when the attention isn't all on them, and they just move. And what I noticed is they don't. After they realize they can't get you back, they stop begging and they just move on to the next victim that
100%.
they can. And I've noticed that clearly now. Is like, oh, so that it gets to a point where you realize there's no getting me back. You cut off the relationship and you move on to the next victim subconsciously. It just happens. They just do that.
I think it's that whole thing. If you'll fall in line, they want that. If you won't do that, they want you to fight with them. But you're just like, if you're apathetic, if you're like, then that's the one thing. If to be ignored, as you say, to a narcissist, it's like that's the one thing they cannot handle.
Mhm.
I am, you know, I want to, before I completely forget, I told that story about Kim at his doorway, sending me on my merry way with this check. I do want to say a few years after that, we were in Kelowna. It was when we were sold our house. We were on our year doing a trip, and he volunteered to take us out in a boat. He had a boat and take us out on Lake Okanagan, and the kids were doing some tubing. We get to the end of the day, and he's dropping us all off, and then he's like, "Rick's got to come with me to put my boat back on the trailer, and I'll drop him off back up at the house." So clearly he doesn't need help, so this is about something. This is years later.
Yeah.
So we're driving in his boat back to where the trailer is, and then he just cuts the motor and turns it off, and we're just floating in the middle of the lake, and he's like, "I want to apologize to you." And he apologized for this moment years before. So it's to his credit. And I don't know who said it. You know that quote by somebody? It was back in the days of the Nazis or whatever, and he was like, when they came for the gypsies, I didn't do anything because I wasn't a gypsy. When they came for the black people, I didn't do anything because I wasn't black. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When they came for the Jews, and then by the time they came for me, there was no one left. I see this happen to guys like Kim as well. They'll come for artists first, probably. They'll come for musicians. They'll come for free thinkers and the creative community, because you're just always like that. But eventually, if you're an authentic individual who's looking to live an authentic, genuine life where your values kind of walk themselves out rather than our shared beliefs, it's like if you can move from here's our shared beliefs that we all agree to, and that's what draws us together, to here's our shared values of like honesty or integrity or love. If you try to make that transition, eventually you fall on the wrong side of the authority. And so I think they came for him, and either he had just been let go or he was about to be. I feel like he had that moment. Now, he might say something completely different, but I always want to make sure to give credit for somebody who, like, if we had a shitty moment, that they had this kind of progression themselves at a different time and reconnected. And he was a very genuine, human, honest person who just said, I just wanted to apologize for that moment. I shouldn't have let them block your concert. Because he could have said, I vouch for Rick. It's great. I talked to leadership and it's great. Let him come. Let him do his show. But I think that's the kind of the unifying thing. And it was so funny, Joby, when I left that community. And then I spent however many years kind of like playing and working and being surrounded by the LGBTQ community. So maybe that's the first time I'd be like, what is it like to be an ally and to be part of a community, and for your friends and the people you work with and everybody around you to have their community, that you're totally welcome to be there, but it's not my community. Then I moved here to Lekwungen territory, to the city of Victoria, and almost immediately was invited to sit at a powwow drum. It was an Anishinaabe teaching drum out of the First People's House at the University of Victoria. And I'd always wanted, drums was my first instrument, and I always wished I could sit at a big drum, but why would I ever even imagine that I would have that opportunity? And here, this drum was open to anybody. Rob Spade was the drum keeper, and he was purposefully, he told the story. He said, my grandfather's generation, he was dragged behind a cop car, and if they found them practicing their ceremonies or songs, they would confiscate the drums and the pipes, they would smash them, whatever. And so he's like, my grandfather's generation, you didn't share your culture like that with anybody other than the oldest male child. So that happened to be Rob's dad. He said, my dad's generation was different. It was freer. There was more rights to be able to practice your songs and ceremonies in public. And so he's like, but you wouldn't share those with anybody who wasn't, Indigenous. And he said, when I was leaving the community, he said, I went to my elders and I said, I feel like the world is in such a place that everybody who wants to make a difference, who wants to come together, needs to come together, and do I have your permission to share our teachings and our songs and stories and ceremonies with anybody who wants to learn? And when they gave him that permission, he was then free to come to his partner was here doing her PhD at the university. So they were here for 2 years. So then he went through the protocols in Lekwungen territory with elders from the Songhees nation to say, do I have your permission to share Anishinaabe teachings and songs on your territory? And he went through all of those kind of protocols. So everything was done in a really good way, which opened up this drum for people like me. There was drummers from all different nations and from Japan, from Africa. There was a really incredible experience.
Wow.
To sit at this drum. And one of the very first things Rob said, it's so funny. This was so healing for me. Maybe this is why I kind of never really looked back on the whole Vineyard days a whole lot. We were talking about how shitty the lyrics are of so many worship songs. You were alluding to that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was so great for me sitting at a drum was there weren't really any words. And if there were words, they were in a language I didn't speak. So every song had a meaning.
Yeah.
If this was the fire song, there would be a teaching behind the fire song, why we sing it. It would be something like each one of us carries a fire inside of us. And when it burns bright, it guides our path in our life, and it can light up the world for those around us. But sometimes our light doesn't shine so bright. And so sometimes we sing the fire song to call the fire inside us to burn a bit brighter. Beautiful teaching. As the drum starts, we're singing. There aren't any words, so I don't have to focus or try to sing past some clunky, preachy lyric. I can just sing with the other drummers and drum with the other drummers and just meditate on the idea of the fire inside me or the fire inside other drummers, or if we're at an event, the intent for the fire to burn bright in somebody who's out in the crowd. And because of that, those songs are really, they're intense to sing. They're really high. You're singing. And so for me as a singer, I also love that. It was very challenging. And I got in touch with my own voice in a way that I've never have before. For instance, I used to lose my voice singing rock and roll in bars. At the end of a night, it would be pretty common for me to have a pretty worn out voice. Maybe even lose it. Mm-hmm. I started singing there and learned how to really get in touch with my vocal cords. And I don't know if I've ever lost my voice since. I could sing for hours and do in schools. I would sing all day long. And my voice might be tired, but I've never lost it since. And so because they're so high in taxing, you can't just sing one after another. If you have a 2-hour drum group every Wednesday night, your drum keeper is going to tell stories usually coming into and coming out of most songs to give the drummers a chance to recuperate and rest. And Rob would have this tagline. And I remember the very first night he said it, he was like, you can't tell anyone what to do. It was just a simple phrase. Either he was going into a story or coming out, I don't remember, but he would say that almost every week. And the first time he said it, I was thinking about those kind of moments that you just described with Nolan. I've just come out of a lifetime of everybody telling me what to do. Everybody's your leaders are telling you what to do, everyone what to do all the time about everything. This is what you're supposed to think. This is what you're supposed to wear. This is what you're supposed to listen to. This is how you're supposed to play your guitar on stage. And you think at the end of the day, you're still going to walk out of whatever that church was called in Kamloops. You're still going to go be an independent, free-thinking human being and musician and take all of those gifts and talents and experience with you, because ultimately he can't tell you what to do. It might work for a few years, but eventually you're going to carry on. And I just love this idea. Now, and it's like social media. Maybe you're even alluding to the time during COVID and how polarized the world became. It's I realized, fuck it. You can't tell anybody what to do. People online start arguing about something, peace out. Yeah. I haven't entered into an argument online for sure forever. I can't even remember the last time, because what's the point?
Yeah.
Two things. You can't what I learned with Kim telling me, they said you did drag and people were drinking and smoking. It's there's no point in defending yourself. If somebody hates you, whatever. And you can't tell anyone what to do. So whatever you happen to think about, if you're the complete opposite of me, whatever.
Yeah.
It's liberating.
It's liberating, and it's also shocking when you come out of organized religion into I was sharing this with Todd the other day. I was like, I had, I gave him this scenario that happened, right? Basically it was meaning that I found way more loyalty in the world than I did in organized religion, because it would
100%.
always have this undertone of, well, I'll give you this story again. So, driving, run out of gas. Phone up my friend, hey, my car's run out of gas. Can you come bring me a jerry can of gas? Well, Gobi, I feel like God's trying to tell you something here. Like, I feel like you just need to be more responsible. So I'd love to come and bring you gas, but I'm standing in the way of God's lesson. So I'm sorry. I'm like really sorry, but I can't do this because God's telling me you need to learn. There's a deeper message here. Fast forward to being in the world, right? Hey, I've run out of gas. Yeah, what highway are you on? I'll be right there, man. No worries. End of story. Like,
totally
completely different outcomes you could come to your friends. I could have come to my friends and say, hey, I think I'm homosexual. I know I've been straight ever since you've known me, but oh, wow. Whew. That's a big one, man. Didn't expect that coming, but all right. So are we still on for dinner?
Right.
Versus in the church, hey, I don't think I'm supposed to, my wife and I, it's just not working out. I think the marriage is over. Hit the big red button. And it's not about how do you feel, what do you want? It's like, no, God, there's only one book, one size fits all. That is not right, period. And now we're going to fit a square peg through a round hole. We're going to hammer the fuck out of it and make that marriage work, because God forbid we have a broken marriage on our hands in our church, And so, yeah, I feel you. I felt the healing loyalty of just, and for me I don't know what your experience was like during COVID, but I was so triggered by my abandonment, and because I was when I left the church, I was excommunicated. All right. So abandonment for me is probably one of my biggest wounds. And so to combat abandonment, I've created, I've come almost, you become a bit of a recluse, because you're like, okay, I got I'm a lone wolf then, because people hurt me. And so when COVID happened and a lot of our close friends turned their backs on us, it really brought that all up to the surface again. And I'm still actually processing that, trying to equal that. Because some people are like, yeah, it was tough, and we lost a few friends, but no big deal. But for me, it was like, holy crap, all of that, like,
I mean, that really sucks. I'm sorry for you that was your journey. I hate hearing that, and yet, of course, I hear that so much, and I'm sure you do too. That is, I remember at one point, it fell certainly on deaf ears. But I remember saying in Winnipeg, I was like, it'd be amazing, you guys. Again, me not understanding what the point is of organized religion. I'm like, it'd be great if you had the perspective that as somebody shows up in your community walking through the front door, imagine what would it be like if the leader of the church said to the person walking through the door, hey, glad you're here. You are super welcome to be here. Glad you're here. We hope for as long as you're here, you find some opportunity to learn and have some maybe experiences, build some relationships, whatever. I hope it's a rich experience for you. But we already know that we're limited here in terms of the scope of what we could offer. And so we already look for that day that your journey will ultimately lead you out the back door into a greater expression of who you are and what you have to bring to this world. Like, I think it was C.S. Lewis that talked about the healthier the tree, the further the branches grow away from each other. How fucking amazing would it be if when somebody came in, you're like, yeah, we get you. You might be here for 6 months or 6 years, but almost certainly you're going to be heading out the back door. So my argument to them was, if that was the case, when somebody's like, hey man, I feel like I've outgrown this, I need to go do this other thing. The community could celebrate that.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
could celebrate you and what you were doing as an extension of their healthy community. They'd be like, hey, well, let's have a morning and just like tell us about what you're doing and head off, and we'll just give you a big high five on the way out, and woo. But because that doesn't exist, and the point isn't about you finding a greater expression of your own self and what you want to do in this world, everybody has to sneak out in the middle of the night. Everybody slinks out, or they're kicked out. And so you don't have a single solitary, hardly a story of people going, yeah, my community said, go for it, Rik. Go hang out with the LGBTQ community and tour with the Wyrd Sisters and have a great time. And eventually, we'll hear, when you start drumming with Standing Nation, we'll be like super excited for you having that opportunity as well. It's like, nah, that's all evil.
That's new age, buddy.
Right? One of the other nights that I remember was so different. At the drum. So I don't know if I can make this. Let me see. The big drum, it's going to sit in in a stand. And the stand that we had was like made out of 2x4s.
Mm-hmm.
So there was one that sat like this and the other one sat like this.
Yeah,
so
like a cradle.
Yeah, like a cradle. And then the drum would sit on top of it, and it would be about this far off of the ground so that you could hear. And we were at the First People's house one night, and there's usually it was often just the drummers, but this night something must have been going on because there was an audience of maybe 100 people, and the drum keeper, Rob, says, Rik, pick up the drum. And there's lots of protocols about the drum, and I was always very mindful of the fact that I wasn't raised in this culture and I didn't know what they were. So I'm like, pick it up, like in front of everybody, pick it up. And he's like, yeah, pick it up. So I'm sitting in my seat. I just picked this drum up. I'm holding this massive thing in my lap. And Rob picks up the cradle and he says, when we lay this one down, we put it down and we're mindful of all of the two-legged creatures, the birds, humans, whatever. We're mindful of all the two-legged animals. And we put this one down on top of it. Now we're mindful of all the four-legged animals that are part of creation, part of everything. And when we set the drum in that cradle, he's like, we're thankful, we're mindful of how everything is connected. And so we think of the tree that was cut down and that was used to make the drum. We think of the animal that gave its life to be the skin of the drum, so that as we're sitting down to drum, everything had meaning. And the meaning overall was our connection to everything and to everyone else, and not in an ownership way, but just in a connected way. And I really loved the teaching when they would, when you were smudging and you would smudge every time, and the teaching that he had around that particular drum would be like, everybody's coming here from a different place today. Maybe you had a stressful day. Maybe you're full of anxiety, or you're frustrated, or what's going on. And you don't want to drum in that. You want to have this moment where you're free from all of that and you let that go. And he's like, as they say, smell, or the scent of smell is the strongest memory. He's like, when you associate smudging with this moment of clearing your mind and clearing your heart and your spirit and whatever, and just kind of this moment, the minute you smell that sweetgrass or whatever you happen to be smudging with, it's like, it reminds you, oh yeah, I don't want to come to the drum with all of this anxiety. And so you just in your head, let it go. I just want to come to this, spend some groundness. And if you don't want to smudge, you don't have to. You just pass it by. And then they would pass the tobacco around. And tobacco was like when you were praying, you would offer your prayer. You could, again, sit there and just, your prayer in your head could be like, I hope we have a good night. I hope this is fun. Or it could be for somebody. Sometimes somebody be like, you know what? This is what's going on in my life. They might voice their concern or their struggle or their challenge. And then you could either take that tobacco and put it on the drum. This was the teaching at that particular drum. Or there was a pouch that went around and you could put the tobacco in the pouch. And at the solstice, you would take that pouch outside and you would spread it underneath a cedar tree. And the idea was that throughout that season, this pouch with this tobacco represented all of the prayers of the drummers. You were mixing your prayer with the drum, or you were just offering that prayer to the drum that night. And the minute you started drumming, the tobacco's flying off of the top of the drum skin. I realized like everything was new to me. These were not my teachings. This was not my culture or my ceremony. It was such a privilege to be able to be there and to learn from Rob and the rest of the drummers. And because there were drummers from many different nations sitting around that drum over the 2 years, oftentimes Rob might share a teaching. For instance, if you were at a powwow and you were going to leave the drum, you would take your stick and you would lean it against the drum. You would never put it on top of the drum.
Okay.
So somebody else would say, well, where I'm from, you would never let your stick touch the ground. You were taught to put your drum stick on top of the drum. And he would just say, yeah, there are many ways.
Mm.
And I loved that. There are many ways. He wasn't
many
saying
ways.
my way's the right way, your way's the wrong way.
Mhm.
It was like this space to say, yeah, there's many ways. And if we were at your drum, that's how we would do it.
Yeah.
And I just thought everywhere outside of, I mean, you're saying the acceptance, the support, whatever you've experienced more genuine connection, hopefully, since leaving the controlling kind of architecture of organized religion, I think is what so many of us also experience. There's a lot of that loneliness and isolation. Because I think there's a thing where churches, it's like, if you know at 10 o'clock in the morning, 100 people meet over here in this building. If you don't want to feel alone physically, you can get in your vehicle and go to that building and feel like I'm part of something. Even though that thing that you're part of is like judging your relationship with your partner and telling her that she shouldn't wear a mini skirt, or that you shouldn't wear a big fur jacket, or that you were too exuberant or happy playing that song. Like all of those rules that ultimately mean you're not accepted, you're not supported, you don't really have community. For me, you know, I stepped out, had way more deeper relationships, many less relationships and friendships than I did then, but more meaningful. And then opportunities. And this is, I think, where I'm so grateful that I'm a musician. Like I wouldn't have been able to sit at Standing Nation. It was a lady, her name was Janet Rogers. She was the poet laureate for the city of Victoria when I moved here. And she was a Haudenosaunee Mohawk artist from Six Nations. And she had been playing one of my songs from an Aboriginal music sampler out of Winnipeg on her show, Native Waves. And she saw me somehow online that I'd posted that I moved to Victoria. So she asked me to come on her show. And then she invited me to sit at the drum. And if I hadn't been a musician and she hadn't heard my song, I would never have met her and she would have never invited me to the drum. And that was where I was like, you know, we alluded way back at the very beginning of this podcast about we found a way to keep making a living.
Yeah.
Through music, through whatever. It's like, yes, I have found a way to keep paying the bills, but this has been a way to live a life that I'm so excited to live every day.
A purposeful life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's touching, man. And I see that you're moved by it. I mean, you talking about all of your work with the Indigenous folks just brings back so many memories. I think we were texting back and forth a little bit, and I was like, that, even though like Christianity and the church took me to these First Nations places, so there is gold, right? Like music and church taught you. It took me to these First Nations communities. I've been to more than I can count across Canada, and I really missed in my life. Like I feel like I'm going through this midlife crisis at the moment, which is like I feel a lack of I don't know, purpose. Like I have a purpose. Like I'm running a business. I'm operating a small farm here. I've got family and kids. Like there's a lot of purpose in that. But soul work, you know, like when I was on those reservations, really, really rough reservations, some of them, the rougher the better for me. I just felt so like I don't remember ever feeling I'm not doing the right thing right now. I remember feeling like, because I was making no money, poor as a church mouse, but I never remember feeling like I wonder what that thing is that I should be doing. I wonder what I wonder what the next thing is. I was like, I am doing the right thing right now. And it felt so, and all I was mostly doing was just walking around the reserve with these kids, like literally just like because they move in gangs, right? Like they love being together. So we would just move in a mob. We would actually sleep all day and we'd be up all night because that's how the kids worked. And the chiefs would get frustrated with us because they wanted a program. We want you to go in gymnasium and do a program. I didn't think this. I just thought that's not where the kids are at. Like they're out in the forest huffing gas, having fires at night, making hooch and getting drunk, and we're just going to go and be with them. We're not going to preach at all. And they would get really frustrated because I already did. Remember when I came past with Dorothy? Were you involved in the
Holy
Soul Patch? What was that club in Calgary that Dorothy had?
no, I know who you're talking about. I don't think I had anything to do with that Calgary thing. I
Right. So,
did.
sorry.
Anyways, I did drive in a shitty van out to a bunch of communities. I do remember that.
But I remember going with her, and there was a lot of money in what she was doing. She was getting all this band money. And
Oh, that was as colonial as it got.
yeah, and then we would go in the gymnasium, set up all these lights, and we would play cover songs. And I was like you, I was a shitty guitar player. I was a great songwriter. I could only play Whitfield, but I had to learn all these covers, and we would play this music, and then I would do all of this drama, and everyone would have a laugh and go home, and that was the end of it. And then, when I got to run my own show, there was nothing that looked productive, except we were just sitting with kids and just talking about whatever they want us to talk about, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't felt so like, do you feel like in this work that you're doing right now, like you were just moved when you were talking there? Do you feel, like it's like soul work? Or
I think I realized, the idea of going into anybody's community, including like the LGBT community, any community, the feeling that you could go in and you have some answer for someone else is so preposterous to me, so arrogant. So I guess I do feel like the sense of connection. I don't know what the difference would be between soul and spirit and whatever. It does feel much more beyond just making a living. I feel so grateful to be able to go and learn, to sit with some of these elders and to hear their stories and their teachings. And what's been happening more in the last few years has been, I used to come into a community and with my cameras and everything else, and I would make these videos, and I still do this, write songs with kids and make videos. And I was like, but my focus has been for years now, I want anybody who's there that wants to learn how to do this for themselves, that idea of working yourself out of a job. I so badly want to find the kids that are in these communities that would like to learn how to do this stuff so that they can be the ones to record their elders' stories and songs and ceremonies so that they're not lost. You were talking about your uncle or whoever he was that got the guns on you back in the day. You don't want those stories to be lost. So this mentorship kind of aspect of being able to say, man, I have some talents and skills that I'd love to offer the community. And I'm just really coming in this supportive role of like, what's happening and what stories would you guys like to tell? And how would you like to tell that? And I find that such a rewarding experience. And there's a few communities across Turtle Island that I've been able to go to for maybe more than 10 years, every year, maybe twice a year. And
oh man, that's great.
that has become the richest kind of experiences that I've been able to have. And maybe that's why I don't think about church and religion with any sense of regret or loss. If I was to compare my first chapter with the subsequent chapters, I had some funny, hilarious, I had some opportunities. You were talking about the first time you got up and you played for 5,000 people. It was at TACF. Kim booked us, those Tribe of One's first gig outside of Winnipeg, and it was for like 7,000 kids at whatever
Fresh Wind.
Yeah. And that's an experience.
That's where I first saw you.
That's an experience you're not going to get kind of just anywhere. And so that was pretty cool. And I look back on it as, wow, I had this opportunity and I had this opportunity and I got to do that. And ultimately, I didn't fit there at all. I was constantly getting in shit, constantly fighting with everyone about every stupid thing. I remember before that conference even started, Kim walked us into the auditorium and he said, okay, Rik, here's something that might happen if you're asking, you get your stage mix. If John feels like it's too loud, he will go over to the sound booth and he'll tell the sound man to like cut it in half or cut it into a quarter, whatever. And to me, that was just so disrespectful that I said I would quit playing. And he looked at me like, no, like,
you're such a pain in the ass, man.
well, I just said like,
that's great.
Because that's not about the kids. That's not about the moment. You're just saying some old fucking dude might arbitrarily say, I want to turn the volume down so that 7,000 people are just at my whim. And I was just like, that's so narcissistic to even say that I'm just like, well, and I would quit. I would just say, I would just walk off the stage and you guys could move on to preaching or whatever is at the correct volume. And so I think that conference hadn't even started. That whole conference I'm not even getting started. I realize we've been talking for almost 2 hours. How did that happen?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I mean, that, you had more balls than I did. Like, I think I was definitely, I got suckered in hard for a long, long time. So there's a bit more hurt there, but I don't look at it. I'm not angry anymore. And I think that's the one thing when
huge. Good for you. When
I talk to, there's a podcast I maybe sent you with Jenny Feldman from Toronto, and listening back to that, I was like, yeah, it's good. Like, we're not bashing it all. We're just observing it all and and I feel that there is, for me anyway, and I'm still moving out of that. Like, what am I so afraid of? Just to call a spade a spade. Like, even when I was talking to Todd, after we shut the podcast down, he drew close to the camera and told me things that he felt like he just couldn't say live anymore. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I feel like, what am I trying to protect? Like, am I actually afraid of, like, what am I afraid? And so there's some of that residual, right? That you're speaking out against God's anointed, and I don't know. But I'm kind of a cliff. I'm like I think the reason that we've got to where we've got to, you and I, is like we jump before we ask how deep the water is. Well, I'll go on tour and play lead guitar.
Right.
Fuck. And so to me, sometimes I feel like this pushing behind me. Just say it. Just, what are you so afraid of? Just say it. Like, and it's not evil to just call a spade and just to talk about these things and not have to pussyfoot around.
That was also what I like when I'm saying to you. I agree. It's what I feel like when I'm telling these kids, when I'm teaching slam. It's like there's this idea that the only time you can talk about bitterness and anger and frustration and loneliness and despair and discouragement is when it's resolved.
Right.
And now you got this happy ending or something.
Right.
And I remember this one kid, I got the whole class starting to write, and then he's just kind of sitting there. So I walk around the class and I come up behind him and I kind of crouch down. I'm like, hey, are you gonna write anything? And he's like, no, I can't do this. I can't do slam poetry. And I always like to pretend like I'm really stupid, like I don't get it. And I'm like, really? Why? Why can't you do slam? And he's like, yeah, I can't write mushy romantic crap. And I'm like, good. Why would you write mushy romantic crap? Like, and of course, he's got this idea that's what poetry is. And so we talked briefly, and I'm like, you could be pissed off and angry, you could be mad, you could think that poetry is whatever you want. We kind of connected to what he wanted to write about, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah. And so he starts writing. And maybe it's a day or two later, I'm back in that class, and we get to the point where it's like slam is all about being a performance art form. So the only way you experience a slam poet's writing is if they actually perform it. So I'm like, now we're at the point, like, who wants to get up and read and perform? So they start doing that. And I walk around the room and he's just sitting there, and I lean down and I'm like, are you gonna perform? And he's like, nah, I can't. And I'm like, really? Why? Why can't you perform? And he's like, it's too depressing. So I say loud enough that the whole class can hear. I'm like, dude, look around. You don't think everybody in this class has been depressed before? And somebody's like, I've been depressed. And somebody else is like, I'm depressed right now. And I'm like, see?
Yeah.
Everybody, like, we all hope that we have the great days. we all hope we feel amazing or we win the lottery or whatever, but it's like hardly anybody does. But everybody has been lonely and frustrated and pissed off. And I think wherever you go in your podcast and your story, Joby, it's like, even if you are bitter, even if you are unresolved with some of these things and you want to share that part of your chapter and your story going, I'm not healed. It's this aspect of my experience is still a gaping wound that really fucking hurts. If you want to share that hurt, out there is somebody else feeling exactly the same way that also doesn't feel like anybody knows what's going on and we're pretending. Like I was at a thing back in December. We came off stage and I walked down and some lady that I knew came up to me and she was like, oh, Rick, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, not good. Immediately, like she heard the smile. She's like, me neither. And then she's like, are you coming to my school in February? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, we have to talk then. Now, if I had faked, yeah,
Doing
great.
okay.
She would have been like, yeah, great, me too.
That's
But
so
the
crazy.
minute somebody goes, no, life sucks right now. It's like, oh, I totally relate. We should talk. So I think that's the power of.
Yeah, well, I wonder what that is, right? Like I feel like even in my marriage, like
Sure.
I live so much in my head and I'm like, I am feeling such and such about my connection with my wife. But I argue my way out of telling her that because it's like, well, she has a right to feel like that. And I kind of did that to her 2 months ago. And then you just don't say, and it's so exhausting. And I envy people that just sometimes just say it how it is right now.
Right.
I think that I've had it modeled though by a narcissistic slant where it's like, there's no empathy in your voice. Right. And I think that, but yeah, it's, there was this amazing song I once heard, and I think the line went, it's a gift to be real. It's a gift to be.
That was a banger.
That was a banger, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you still writing?
No.
Are you still playing?
So I like Whitfield was like, I was all in. Like I lived and breathed, and actually caused me chronic insomnia for 10 years. I don't know if it caused me. I think coming out of church, the trauma coupled with some accidents, coupled with a bunch of stuff. But I was so obsessed with getting it right that I would wake up in the middle of the night with lyrics. I would I could not settle on a chorus until it was absolutely perfect or and I'm like, it's like kind of like a crazy artist who can't sleep, just has to get the art finished. And so I had this relationship with, I've never felt as happy and as in the moment as being on stage when the sound is right, the crowd is right, everything. I mean, you can't give me any money that feeling is. Like I look at pictures that somebody has snapped a picture of me on stage and I could see my face and I'm like, who's that guy? Like sheer joy when everything is just firing perfect. Right. The in-ears sound good, everything. And so that was magic. And we had, it felt like a band of brothers, like just going to conquer the world with our band, driving across the country in the middle of winter and playing to half empty clubs and then sometimes a packed club, Fluke and all of these kinds of crazy things. But I feel I can't, picking up the guitar and writing a song. I'm kind of a bit nervous about it. And actually thinking about it right now, when you say that, it's like there's a lot of things in my life that have that same, like working with First Nations people and homeless people was my obsession. Like I think the pendulum just swings too far with me and I overcook myself. Like all I lived in, like sometimes I'll drive down East Side Vancouver and I'll be at a traffic light and see all this chaos around me. And I'll be like, there was a time when I would pull my van over and just go and sit with that guy who's shooting up. And I would just sit there. There was a time, years, that's what I would do. I would hang out with prostitutes. I would go to the jails and I was just by myself. I'd just drive people to court cases, crazy stories. And then I would do all this stuff with First Nations. And then I'm like, and I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, was that the same guy? And I'm afraid to tread back in there because I'm afraid of getting sucked back in because I'm realizing actually just talking to you that that's a trend through my life for good or for bad, right? Like my wife says to me, because I'm very creative with my hands. So I just moved the creativity to another thing. So it went from music to running a business. I wasn't ever really excited about making lots of money. I was excited about building a business. I was like building something. So now I build stuff, and Tara will say, she knows I'm a bit upset. Like I'll just go hard, but she goes, but I kind of like it because shit gets done. You know, you say I'm going to go build a treehouse. 2 days later, you built it. You know, I was like, so do I write music anymore? No, I mean, I've had fun with my youngest daughter is a really good singer, and so I've been learning cover songs, which has actually taught me how to actually play guitar.
Right.
And so we did a little. She's kind of gotten to the stage now where the cell phone has captured her, so we're just navigating that.
Right.
But so the music has taken a back seat. But yeah, it just feels like when I tell friends that I hang out with here that I go mountain biking with, that I used to have a band, and they just look at me like, "What? You're the guy that always builds stuff." And then when I had a band, and I'd say, "Oh, I used to be in Venezuela living with the Yanomami Indians, and in the bush, and I was so incredibly alive there, and I didn't want to come home." They're like, "But you're the dude who's always downtown on Granville Street dressing like a rock star."
Right.
What? So it's like
totally
a chameleon. A creative chameleon, maybe.
It's the capacity to live beyond the confines of these kind of cultural norms. Just comes naturally too.
But listening to you talk about how you now are going to work with these First Nations communities, I wonder if it's just like now you feel so much fruit by fading into the background and letting them move into the front. Do you think that just comes with age?
Probably. I think we're all like, the natural drift of humanity is towards, self-interest and selfishness, being self-absorbed and all that kind of stuff. And I think as I started to spend more time with elders and realize if I was going to tell a story about some significant event in my life, I don't know, maybe in my 20s, it would be like, I met this other young artist or musician or some semi-famous person in the music scene or something. I don't know what I would have talked about in my 20s. Maybe just myself. I don't literally remember. But then you realize, like Bob, the guy who said, be a storyteller, not a preacher, or this person, the people who have had Rob, my drum keeper, the people who've had a lasting impact in my life have had that role where it's like, kind of that supportive thing. I just offer you this and then I take it and make it my own, and it comes this transformative value or whatever in my life. And I think maybe I started realizing like Joby, the last 4 years I've almost died twice, like almost like right on the edge. And
how?
Crazy. I was driving up north for a contract. This is, I think, how fragile life is. I was talking about my dad, but I left. I had 3 weeks, a 3-week contract up in northern BC, and I left home feeling like $1 million. All I'm doing is driving up to Fort St. John in my truck, listening to podcasts, drinking coffee, and I barely make it to Williams Lake. I was feeling sick. I thought maybe I'd eaten something wrong and I had food poisoning, and I got to Williams Lake. I got to this hotel room and I just hit the floor in this bathroom, and I was just throwing up violently for hours until I realized, Rick, if you don't call 911, you're not going to get out of this hotel. So they come and get me, and they take me to the hospital, and I remember waking up in this doctor's looking down at me, and he says, Rick, your intestine has gotten tangled. And we're going to have to do surgery, like emergency surgery to like remove it or whatever. And I'm like, when? And he's like, as soon as the team gets here, I've already called them. And it was a miracle that this guy had just moved to Williams Lake not too long ago, that they even had a surgeon in this hospital in this town that could do it. And in the subsequently days later, they said, well, it's this genetic thing you were born with. There was this little loop, and your intestine at any point of your life could have gotten tangled up in this thing. It just chose today for whatever reason to do that. And I was just like a couple hours from not making it. And I'm like, what was crazy about that was that I left home waving, kissed my family goodbye, waved to them. I'm feeling $1 million. And it's like, if I had died before midnight, my family had been like, how? He left home, like, feeling 100% and doesn't make it to midnight. That's insane. And then I had a relapse a couple of years later. So about 1.5 years ago, this very similar thing happened. And so for me, I have no idea how long I have. I mean, none of us do, I know on the cosmic sense, but I literally don't know. And so I feel like, man, every day, I already have had those moments laying there going, I certainly don't regret not making tons of money. I certainly don't regret selling my house and spending a year traveling with my kids. I certainly don't regret, spending the last 2 years traveling around to all these dodgeball things, filming my kids and making all these videos to promote them and hang out with them and see them excel at something that they're doing and talk to them about their business ideas and what they want to do. It's like, I've already been there. I already know what I'm going to regret and what I'm not going to regret. And maybe that's why I look back on this distant past of, there's another podcast called Heaven Bent. I don't know if you've heard of this. And I don't know who she is, but she does these seasons on, it started off with TACF and I was like, oh, I know
heard
some of
about
these
it.
people. Oh, and then she starts, the latest one was this Art Lucier dipshit in Kelowna who stole one of my songs, one of my worst songs. Oh, Joby, I do have to tell you the story really quickly. Somebody says to me a couple years ago, they're like, we're texting back and forth. It was my guitar player, and he's like, something about the guy who wrote "Yay God," and I'm like, what?
Yay God.
And I'm like, because I hate that song, and it was one of my most successful songs, and I hate it the most. And so it's like the fact that these people keep re-recording it is like agony to me. And he's like, finally, he just goes, Rik, just Google it. So I go, and this guy named Art Lucier, who is this pastor of this church in Kelowna, who's this anti-COVID lockdown dude, and he was like in the media for all of this reason. He had this album where he had recorded, it was like Yay God, written by Art Lucier, lyrics and music or whatever, copyright Art Lucier. I was like, what?
No
and
way.
it's like, it's on Apple Music, it's on Spotify, it's everywhere. And I'm like, so SoCan, do you register your stuff with SoCan?
Yeah.
Of course. So I contact SoCan. Hey, can you help me out? This guy's like, here's the song. I registered it with you in whatever year. And now this guy's claiming that he wrote it, or he's like published this album and it's everywhere. And it's like, oh yeah, we can't help you with that. I'm like, you got one job. So
protect the artist.
I wrote back and I said, can you at least tell me if he registered this song with you as if he wrote it? Like, no, we can't help you with that either, Ken. And I'm like, I literally wrote and said, you have one fucking job and you're terrible at it, so screw you. So I found out that he had released it, I think, through CD Baby. So I contact them and I'm like, this dude, here's the copyright information. You have promoted an album where this guy's stolen my song. And they're like, okay, Rik, well, he has 90 days to respond or disagree or to do something. In 90, I forgot all about it. And then 90 days later, they're like, yeah, okay, he hasn't challenged your claim, so they just pulled it everywhere. But in the process of that, I find out that this idiot dude is like this pastor of this church in Kelowna. And then I find out through this Heaven Bent podcast that he's now stepped back because of all kinds of heinous allegations.
No way.
Of conduct and things that he's done and whatever. And it's like, I get that podcast I can kind of listen to it and I kind of can't, because healing for me has been forgetting.
Yeah.
Forgetting all of these people, forgetting the things that we used to do and say and how we used to look at it. And yeah.
Well, you scratch the wound, it might bleed again.
Right.
More than likely.
That's a good way of putting it.
If you let it heal, it'll heal. But if you keep scratching it, it'll just keep bleeding. And then for sure, I mean, I've almost died. Yeah, so many. I like in the last 2 years, I've had 5 ER accidents that could have taken my life. And I'm covered in scars. I have close to 100 stitches over my body, probably. But these scars are that when I look at my scars, it tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And would I wish that scar wasn't there? Yeah, but it's there. Right. And it tells me, don't do that, as crazy as you don't, maybe check before you do that.
Right.
And it's the patch. It tells me that I have not lived a safe life, so you can't expect to live the life that I've lived, which I have no regrets, because like I said before, the podcast is showing me how many experiences I've had, like all of these people that I'm triggered by. I'm like, oh, that person and that person. And if I hadn't just jumped over and over and over and
right.
over again, then I wouldn't. And some of those jumps, there was not enough water at the bottom, and I hit. But therein lies the story. If it was always a good landing, well, then you're just writing a fluffy love song every single time. You know, you've been born rich, and you'll always be rich, and you've never experienced poor, and you're boring as fuck.
Right.
You know?
Totally.
Yeah. Should we wrap it up? I think there's lots more to talk about. I mean, we barely got into your work that you're doing now. But hey, we can always do that again.
2 hours and 15 minutes. This feels like isn't that how long Joe Rogan talks to his guests for? And I'm always like, who the hell can talk for 2 hours?
I've been enjoying your podcast.
Oh my God. I'm still finding it. And thank you, by the way. I felt like I want to do this. And I don't know what I want it to be yet. And I feel like the only way to do it, again, jumping, I'm just going to start. And then I'm going to listen back to it. And I'm going to feel like I'm going to listen to what I like out of it and what I don't. I tried to make it about interviewing people like this. I always wanted to talk to people. And then it's like that becomes the people I want to talk to are like, oh, yeah, I'm really not comfortable, like hearing my voice or whatever. I'm like, for fuck's sake, your story is so cool. Yeah, I'm just not comfortable. And so I'm like, anyway.
I got this old landlord in Vancouver who's, I just call him the racist pig. You know, he just says what he thinks. He's an old guy. He's so politically incorrect. And I thought, oh my God, it would be such, like, you know, his dad used to own like a really famous nightclub in Vancouver and just crazy. But no, there's no chance in hell he's going to be.
Right.
He's like, I'll be arrested. I'm not putting it down on paper.
That's wisdom.
Yeah. What's the name of your podcast?
Being Creative.
Being Creative. I'll put it in the show notes, and you can let me know if there's any other websites or.
Cool. Thanks for having me on and talk. And that was really fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, Rick. It's been 20 years, and we live on the same island.
I know. We'll have to get together at some point.
Yeah, because Tara and I were thinking about going on a date to Victoria sometime, and I was like, oh, I think you'd really like Zara. And
yeah, we'll stop in. There's a guest room if you want to spend the night too.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Okay, brother, thank you.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.
Love you, man.
You too.